Hi, good afternoon, all.
Hello.
Give it just another minute and we'll stop at the top of the hour.
Anthea, I'll be sitting in for Allison today. She is out at a conference.
Okay, great. Is she at AHF Live
I believe so,
in
yes.
Chicago?
Oh, no, it's local.
Okay, great. Well, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Anthea Martin. I'm chair of the State Housing Board. We will kick off the meeting with a request for approval of the October 2023 meeting votes.
So moved.
This is second. This is Ladon.
Great. So we have a motion by James and a second by Ladon. All those in favor signified by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Great, that passes. Thank you all. Next up, we are going to kick this off with with Andrew Paredes and his comments and budget update.
Thank you and good afternoon, board members. I'll start off first with a budget update. You'll see the budget that was sent out. As you read and we discussed last month, we continue to be in a forward committed state with our HTG state gap funds. So we're not accepting new applications for that funding source, as we have made awards or our underwriting applications that are projected to take us out through the end of this fiscal year. But no longer than that. So we feel good about our budget position with regard to that funding source to finish out the fiscal year over the next 8 months. You will see that we do have gap funds available, especially in our federal programs, CDBG and HOME. So we are working with applicants, encouraging applicants to consider and utilize those gap funding sources. This year, you'll also see that we have begun to get our Proposition 123 funds at the Division of Housing, both the AHOP or home ownership funds that are earmarked for down payment assistance, owner repair, and development and acquisition of affordable home ownership opportunities, as well as our Prop 123 people experiencing homelessness funds, which you can see are fairly well fully subscribed at this point for this fiscal year, using those funds to further support permanent supportive housing projects statewide. And then the biggest available source that we have is our Senate Bill 22-159. That was the $150 million revolving loan fund that the legislature appropriated last year. That is primarily rolled out by us in our AHIF. That is our Affordable Housing Investment Fund. You all recently approved a number of those applications that allow third-party CDFIs and other affordable housing lenders to utilize capital to go out in the market and make affordable housing loans, as well as our THLF. And you'll see that first application coming through today. Those are DOH direct loans using these funds that are underwritten and will be contracted as must-pay debt. So we apply a bit of a more robust standard to the underwriting of these, looking at it more like a lender so that these funds can come back and be re-revolved, as opposed to our cash flow loans for gap funding that are a little bit more kind of lenient, but that's not the right word, but take on a little bit more subsidy in nature, meaning that they're only intended to be paid back when there's positive cash flow. So right now, that's kind of our biggest available funding source, and we have seen an uptick in applications for that. So happy to take any budget questions before I move on.
So Andrew, the THLF
Yep.
bucket of funds, when I'm looking at the State Housing Board budget report that was sent prior to the meeting,
Yep.
I don't see THLF as
Yep.
one of the buckets.
So that is all part of Senate Bill 159. So when we say THLF, we're really referring to the NOFA or RFP that's available and not the funding source itself. So both the THLF and the AHIF are all coming out of Senate Bill 159.
Okay, and then so Senate Bill 159, $142.5 million is how much has been appropriated.
Yep.
And then the available funding under that bucket is 78 million,
Correct. So
with
that one,
30 million already being set aside for other projects.
that's a great question. I appreciate you highlighting this. 142 million was appropriated. 78 million has been awarded. And I'm sorry, the difference between 142 and 78 has been awarded. So there's $78 million available to award. We are currently working on 30 million of applications. That does not necessarily mean it's set aside. That means that those applications have been submitted and we are underwriting them, and they are soon to be brought to you for approval recommendations.
That makes so much sense. Could you possibly add a column that says awarded? And then
Yeah.
where the 78 million is, could you say available to award? Because how you just explained it makes sense. And I think Sam mentioned this once. When someone explains it to me, it makes sense. And then I pick it up again in a month or so and I'm confused again.
That makes a lot of sense. So I will make a note here in my paper to maybe work with you and Thea and send a couple drafts of how we might update this, and
That
then
would be great.
pilot it at the next or an upcoming board meeting.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Nancy.
Thank you. I was wondering if there were time constraints on these. I hate to ask you to add yet another column, but I'm just really curious as to, some of these look like there's not much left in the fund, and some of them there seems to be more. But I'm wondering if they all have to be spent by December 31st, or if we have till July, or what the deal is.
So I will answer that question verbally, and then I'll add it to the proposed budget 2.0 at the bottom. Really, the only funds with an absolute drop dead must spend by date are the ARPA, or the federal ARPA stimulus funds. Those being House Bill 21-1304, as well as House Bill 22-1377. All of our other funding sources do not have a must-spend date by. No, meaning they can roll forward. And we have historically done a great job of always staying right on the edge of that wheel rolling forward, so that we're underwriting deals and recommending them for approval as the money's coming in, so that it doesn't sit dormant. There are some caveats to that with our federal CDBG and home. They give you kind of, a 5-year spend horizon that we always, are never in danger of missing out on either. But they do have a bit of a must spend date, but not as urgent as those SLFRF funds. Again, 1304 and 1377, which must be spent in full by December of 2026.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Sam.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. The Prop 123 funds.
Yep.
Are those only available to communities or for projects in communities that have opted into the program? And then the second part of that question is, if a community has opted in, do you reserve some funding for that community, or how does that really work?
Both very good questions. The first answer is yes. As of November 1st, which was the deadline, I think there are 200 plus communities. So counties, towns, cities, municipalities that have opted in. So Prop 123 funds for development projects can be spent on projects within those opted in communities. It doesn't have to be absolutely an application, since I'm looking at Ladon at the top of my screen, that comes from Jefferson County to be spent there. But it could be spent from with a housing authority but the project itself must be located in an opted-in community. So that's the answer to that first question. There is a caveat there that if we get applications for homelessness response that are intended to be essentially like emergency response at the individual level, think like our emergency solutions grant annual NOFAs, those can be spent anywhere within the state regardless of opted-in status. That's the only caveat, is that kind of emergency-based individual support can be spent anywhere regardless of opt-in. There are certainly some fine print there, but that's the highlight on that carve out. Your second question, Sam, was with regard to set-asides. We have not, at the Division of Housing, set aside any money, or any formula for individual communities. We will, however, be going out to the public at the beginning of 2024 to stakeholder and generate our new Prop 123 inspired programs, asking folks, what should Prop 123 be spent on in the homeownership development arena? Should there be maximums, minimums? Should there be, AMI set-asides, those kinds of things. So we will be asking the public for feedback and help in developing those programs. For this current year, we're using those funds to backfill our existing program guidelines, but do look forward to expanding them to be Prop 123 specific in the coming year.
Thanks so much. Sure appreciate it.
So moving on for updates to the board, I will update that staff have concluded our contracting and process improvement period. Essentially, we took 2 months to really focus on internal processes, and staff have done a great job revamping our internal tools, our application underwriting and contract processes, really with an eye towards getting faster and more efficient at what we've been doing in order to meet the governor's executive order goal of 90-day turnaround time for our contracts from award to completed contract, for that to be in place by the end of this fiscal year. So we're very excited to begin rolling out those recommendations to the public for comments, and then to you, the State Housing Board, where needed, or to begin implementing them internally after kind of rolling them out and stakeholding them with the public. So more to come there, but the work has been fantastic, and staff really rolled up their sleeves and have a lot of great initiatives that we're ready to put in place. So it's been awesome to have that time at the staff level to be working on those process improvements. And the last item I'll update you on is that we are in the midst of a final 2023 contracting sprint. We've identified 30 contracts that are still outstanding, that we feel like with work both at the staff level and at the applicant level, we can get everybody to the table and get those closing docs signed by the end of the year. So that will be a huge accomplishment that's already in place. We've seen definitely an uptick in the number of contracts signed each week, and expect for that sprint to be successful through the end of the year, again, in alignment with the governor's executive order. And then for you all, a bit of housekeeping and asking for your feedback here on the next couple of items. At our December 12th State Housing Board meeting, every year, the first meeting in December needs to serve a dual purpose, both a regular State Housing Board meeting as well as our annual PAB or private activity bond meeting. Last year, we split the meeting up into 2 parts. We did a first part before lunch for private activity bonds, and then we did a second part regular State Housing Board meeting after lunch. Certainly that option exists if we'd like to do that this year. We've taken a look at it at the staff level and feel like we could do it all in one sitting if we were able to start the meeting at 1 o'clock like normal on December 12th and do the private activity bond portion first through, from 1 o'clock to 2:15, and then start the regular State Housing Board meeting at 2:15 and perhaps extend our meeting from 3 to 3:30 and feel like we can get the projects in and out in that, hour and 15 minutes, probably even less than that. But I'm asking you all for just take your temperature on if we could extend our December 12th meeting to 3:30 and try to accomplish both of those tasks as opposed to having to do a special meeting. LaDawn?
I would prefer doing them all at once and just extending our 1 o'clock meeting. That would be my preference. I don't know about everyone else. That seems easier than doing a morning and an afternoon.
I agree.
I anticipated that would likely be where you all want to go, and that seems the most efficient use of time as well. So as we get closer, we at the staff level will be sure to let our applicants know that we're probably going to be on one of those compressed time schedules, so we'll need to keep the presentation short and efficient, like we did this summer with all those tag applications. So we will plan on that in terms of scheduling. Thank you all very much. And then the last thing to think about is that we have the second December meeting is scheduled for December 26th. That is, obviously that holiday week that falls between Christmas and New Year. Traditionally, we, or in the past, we have skipped that second December meeting. But this year we have some emergency rulemaking that our Office of Regulatory Oversight needs to finalize before the end of the year. And so I'm proposing, and you all can think about it and reply back to me, to see if we could have a quorum to do a meeting on December 19 instead. That's a Tuesday afternoon as well. It would just be, that second and a half-ish week of December. So, don't need a decision now, but if you all could think about that perhaps and get back to Laura or me, if that would work to do just a 1 hour meeting, December 19 instead of the 26th, we could take care of that rulemaking business and any deals that might need to be reviewed. So with that, I think I'll wrap up my updates.
Thanks for that update, Andrew. Do you want each of us to respond to you? Can we just say that if anyone is opposed to it, that they reach out to you? And can we assume everyone's on board otherwise?
I wouldn't mind if you all would just send Laura Kane an individual email affirmatively confirming you can be in. That way she definitely knows, we definitely know that we will have a quorum.
Okay.
Appreciate
Great.
that.
I'm sure we can do that. And in regards to quorums, if I can just make a comment, we have a couple of people who were absent today and they gave their proxies, they handed their proxies off. Just a reminder, I think it's really helpful, especially as we have holidays coming up. If you can't make a meeting, if you could just be sure to hand your proxy over to someone. You all have been really great at doing that this year, but it just makes sure that we always have a quorum. So thank you in advance for that. Next up is Kristen Toombs and Nellie Stagg with the THR grant adjustments from the City and County of Denver.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Anthea. Kristen is unfortunately out sick today, so it'll just be me presenting. Nellie Stagg, I am the Transformational Homelessness Response Manager at the Office of Homeless Initiatives. So the OHI team submitted a memo to the State Housing Board. We are seeking approval of an adjustment to one of our previous THOR awards. Within the memo, we discussed how the Transformational Homelessness Response Program, or THOR, had some additional funding made available at the end of October. We had one previous recipient, Hope House, that had received a $200,000 THOR award that rescinded. They declined that award. And then staff were also informed that we had some interest that was earned on the THOR corpus that the division had been holding. So we spent several weeks in October thinking what was the most appropriate use of those funds, and they corresponded with an official request from the City and County of Denver for some modifications in addition to their existing THOR award. So that's what we're here to talk to you about today. So the City and County of Denver had previously requested over $36 million across 9 applications to the Transformational Homelessness Response Grant Program. The Division of Housing had approved 2 THOR awards to the City and County of Denver, and out of that $36 million requested, we approved $6 million previously in THOR funding. There was one $4 million grant in the first cycle for street outreach. And in the second cycle, there was one $2 million grant for rapid rehousing. So the city and county of Denver reached out officially requesting to alter the original approved activities in that first grant. So that $4 million from street outreach actually to be allocated towards emergency shelter. They also requested to increase the award amount. Included a brief blurb in the State Housing Board memo from the City and County of Denver's request, talking about how the priorities had really shifted within the community since their initial applications in February, provided some great detail for us about how they really will be utilizing those dollars for emergency shelter instead. So with all of that information, with this opportunity, the Division of Housing staff is recommending to the State Housing Board approval of that request to redirect those $4 million from street outreach to emergency shelter, to housing-focused emergency shelter activities. And then we are also recommending the State Housing Board approves $2.9 million in House Bill 22-1377 interest that was generated, as well as that $200,000 of return funds from a previous Thor grantee to that amended grant. So this would be an increase of $3.1 million, bringing that first grant for the City and County of Denver from $4 million to $7.1 million to support Denver's emergency declaration efforts. So that is the request that we have and a recommendation of the State Housing Board. I am happy to take any questions. We also have Cole Chandler here from the City and County of Denver, should you all have any specific questions that he can assist with.
Thanks for that update, Nellie. Any questions from the board? Sam?
Thank you, Anthea. Cole, the original dollars that were requested for street outreach, how are you accomplishing that without any of DOH's money going into that activity now?
Yeah, great question. Cole Chandler, Mayor Johnson, Senior Advisor on Homelessness Resolution, and Jennifer Bice, who is our Interim Executive Director of Housing Stability, is here as well. So we are continuing to make significant investments in street outreach through our city's general fund, and that is being accounted for in our budget year 2024. Since we came into office, we've made a significant focus on bringing people indoors from unsheltered homelessness by the end of this year and have declared a state of emergency around those goals. And so just with that shift in priorities, we needed some extra dollars to help us launch some of these projects at the end of 2023 and 2024. And so that's sort of the nature of the request, but we're planning to continue making a significant investment in street outreach in 2024 through our city's budget. Jennifer, anything you'd add to that?
Thank you so much for that, Cole, and for that question, Samuel. I think the only thing I would add to that is that we are also able to utilize the city's homelessness resolution fund, which is a local dedicated funding source for homelessness response and resolution work. It's a 0.25% sales tax that Denver voters passed. And so that's also been an area that we've looked at in terms of outreach. And as Cole said, really looking to align these dollars to some critical needs that are bigger gaps for us.
Thank you both so much for that answer.
James?
Hi, Cole. James Martinez. Now, will any of this funding be going to the tiny home advancement from the city?
Great question. Jennifer, can you speak to kind of the specifics of how we've allocated it in this particular request?
Yep, absolutely. So we are in this request looking to infuse state dollars into two strategies primarily. One is non-congregate sheltering. So shelter opportunities through repurposed hotels. This is something the City and County of Denver started to do during the pandemic and is really seen as a valuable tool in our toolbox to bring people inside who maybe wouldn't access congregate shelter for any number of reasons. So that's one component. And then another component is support for micro communities or tiny home villages as part of this strategy as well.
I'll say in both cases, this particular request would go to fund the supportive services side of that. And so where we're delivering the supportive services that provide people support and stability while they're in the units, while they're working to transition into permanent housing options.
Okay, that was my next question. And you answered it. Because I know I know this is, I know some of the city council members from at the city of Denver have some issues with the tiny home items moving forward. That's what I've heard on through my channels. And definitely, we need to have that conversation. I think if any of this money is going to get funded for the tiny home initiatives.
Yeah, James, I appreciate you asking that question. In the memo, we also, to Cole's point as well, we're funding the supportive services for those individuals. And with that, it's really that housing focus is what the Division of Housing has. So how can we move these folks into formative, safe, stable housing? And so that's really the intention of this grant that we're bringing to y'all.
Thank you.
And I also just want to share, in terms of our context here in Denver, the state of emergency that we issued on July 17th has continued to be updated. And every time it's updated, it's voted on by City Council. So just last night, City Council voted to re-up and reapprove the emergency declaration. And so while every bit of public discourse is always dynamic and there's always sets of compromises and ideas about what the right solution is moving forward, we continue to have the support of City Council in this overall effort.
Thank you.
It's a huge undertaking, and I'm sure most of us have been reading about it and trying to keep up with it. Is there a website that we could visit that shows how far along you are with the goal of housing 1,000 homeless, and maybe something that breaks down the details like James was referencing, whether it's tiny homes, whether it's shelters, where the funding is going? Is there a link you could share in the chat with us that might give us a one-stop site where we could go to find that information? There we go. She had it at her fingertips.
Exactly. Yeah, so there's a dashboard there that shows our progress. It looked like as of noon today when it updated, we were at 272 people indoors. There's also a dashboard that shows progress in terms of unit production and units in the pipeline. And we're really pleased that we have a path to open 1,000 units by the end of this year. So we're kind of in a race to the finish line over the last 7 weeks of the year to get the units that are in acquisition acquired and open. And so that's kind of it, but all that's outlined on that website.
Very helpful. Thank you. LaDawn?
So I've noticed in the media that there's a lot of new migrants coming to the Denver area. Does this funding go to support those efforts of finding housing for them? And how is that impacting, like, housing 1,000 people if we have 2,000 coming in every week or whatever number it is, that makes your job even more challenging? So I was just wondering how this money might be helping with those efforts.
Yeah, so obviously the question of the hour that's it right there. So I think, to date, we have been able to keep these efforts separate and pursue them on a couple of different parallel tracks. The migrant response efforts are benefited by FEMA reimbursement dollars. And so for people that come into the country with an A number and are sent to Denver, we have some reimbursable dollars that we can utilize. And so that has been kind of what our approach has been. There has been a shift in terms of who is coming to Denver. We are seeing more and more families that are coming to Denver and more people that are coming to Denver and not necessarily just wanting to get to their next destination, but actually are seeing Denver as their final destination. And so there has been a bit of a shift. And I think for the first time, we're actually starting to see some of those migrant families winding up on the streets and encampments. To date, the way that we've been pursuing the effort related to the homelessness emergency has been focused more specifically on the encampments that are around town and how we could work to resolve those. But we're starting to see more crossover. So I guess in response to your question, these issues are on parallel and separate tracks. And the money that we are asking for here would specifically support those that are experiencing homelessness in the Denver community that have been living in encampments, oftentimes people that are chronically homeless, not necessarily explicitly the migrant population, but it is hard in our minds as we look at this long term to think of those as two separate, completely separate issues, because we are starting to see migrant families in encampments.
Thanks, Cole.
Great. Thank you all for this update. Nellie, did you need a vote from us?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. Well, I'd like to ask the board for a motion for approval of the THR grant adjustment.
So moved. This is Ladon.
Thanks, LaDawn.
Second.
Thanks, Sam. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Wonderful. Thank you all. Okay, next we're moving on to the project application review stage. We have 3 deals up today. I will need to be recusing myself from the second one, West Holden Place. But let's actually, I misspoke. We have 2 deals today. So starting out will be Well Power, Sheridan on 10th, and presenting will be Demetra English.
And good afternoon. I'm happy to introduce Darla Goddard and Laura Clark to present this project.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Darla Goddard, Director of Real Estate for Well Power. Joining me from SB Clark today is Christina McKenzie, as Laura Clark is out on vacation. We would like to take this opportunity to thank Colorado Division of Housing for your support of Well Power Sheridan on 10th Permanent Supportive Housing Project. We are building on the success of our previous project, Sanderson Apartments, which was feasible using the social impact bond and with DOH's assistance as well. Homelessness is a significant issue within the city and county of Denver, as we were all just hearing. The $3 million GAP funding grant from DOH will help Well Power house 60 chronically homeless individuals that today do not have a safe, stable, and secure place to call home. Like Sanderson, Sheridan on 10th will utilize trauma-informed design methodologies, which include wider hallways, bright and open design, clear sight lines, and a safe courtyard fully enclosed and open to the sky. The unit designs replicate Sanderson with an open design with clear sight lines from each room so that there are no hidden corners or areas. Permanent supportive housing projects like Sheridan on 10th would not be possible without the support and partnership of the Colorado Division of Housing. And for that, we thank you again for your continued support.
Thank you, Darla. Any questions from the board? Rick Garcia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question, Rick Garcia, Executive Director of DOLA. On the budget breakdown, there's a CHAFA Prop 123. Is that concessionary debt that's pending, or has that been approved?
It is pending, yes.
Okay, so do you know when you'll receive notice of approval?
It will be in January.
Okay, and that's the timeline for all the concessionary debt applicants, correct?
That is correct. That's my understanding.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
Darla, you referenced Sanderson. That was the previous development, right? The mental health center was involved with?
That is
Or
correct.
led.
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit to Sanderson's success? I mean, how is their maybe perhaps specifically their stability?
Sure, absolutely. So Sanderson, just like Sheridan on 10th, was 60 units, 1 bedroom, 1 bath. And out of the 60 individuals that came into Sanderson right from the beginning, we have approximately 18% that are still living with us. The others have either moved on and continued on their housing continuum. Unfortunately, we've had some who have passed away as well. But it has been a great success as far as with the Housing First model and being and harm reduction and being able to really help individuals coming off the street and helping get them stabilized and really prepared for if they wanted to move on into the community, which many have done.
Thank you for that. Do they have a wait list? Are they always fully occupied?
So there is a wait list. It would be fully occupied, but many of the individuals that we are working with, when it was the social impact bond and now also utilizing the one home. Being that it's chronically homeless individuals, a lot of times we have a difficult time finding them when we're trying to, they'll come through to us, we'll get their names. We'll go and make appointments with them. And then if they're, a lot of times if they're in encampments, it's really hard to then go and find them. But our case management team is really very prudent and diligent about, trying to stay in touch with them. So, I can't sit here and tell you it's 100% occupied at all times, but it certainly has not been a negative. It's been more like between 5 to 7%.
Okay. Thank you for that.
You bet.
Any questions from the board? Any other questions? Okay, thank you for the presentation. Next up is West Holden Place.
Yes, West Holden Place. With us today, we have Adam Berger and David Rosenberg to present this project.
Thank you. I'm Adam Berger, and I'm the owner-developer of West Holden Place. West Holden Place is a 77-unit workforce housing project in the Sun Valley neighborhood of Denver. And it's the project is 6 stories. It's 5 stories of multifamily units over a podium. It is comprised of 67 one-bed units and 10 two-bed units. We have been working with Demetra, Lisa, and Wayne on the Colorado Division of Housing Transitional Housing Loan Program for this project, and for $2.134 million of gap funding for the project. And this is a critical component to the capital stack of this project. Without it, we wouldn't be able to build the project. 16 units, approximately 20%, just over 20% of the units will be deed restricted at 80% AMI rent limits. 51 units will be deed restricted at 120% AMI rent limits, for a total of 67 out of the 77 units. So 87% of the project will be deed restricted. 10 units will remain at market rent. And we've also reached out to CHAFA to participate in their middle income access program. So the combination of CHAFA's program and the Colorado Division of Housing's Transformational Housing Loan Program will allow us to fill the gap between our debt and our equity to allow us to build this project. We're currently contemplating a loan closing in January, subject to securing some bridge financing until assuming that you're gracious enough to award us this loan and start construction. The other thing I would add is that this is a modular housing development, meaning that all of the units above the podium are built off-site in a factory. It's what we refer to as volumetric modular, meaning that these are boxes, big long boxes, where the units that contain the units for this housing. We've been a modular developer in the Denver area now for 7 years. We've successfully built townhomes and duplexes for our own company, and most recently for the last 4 years for nonprofits, including the Globeville Elyria Swansea Coalition. And most recently, we broke ground on a 12-unit duplex project on behalf of Elevation Community Land Trust. Those projects, both for GES and for Elevation, are affordable for sale housing. So our company is really dedicated and committed to leveraging the benefits of modular construction to address the lack of affordable housing, or to deliver essentially affordable housing to communities across Colorado.
Thank you, Adam. Any questions from the board? Sam?
Thank you, Anthea. Adam, we constantly hear that modular construction has its advantages in terms of cost efficiency. Yet on this project, we see the numbers are above the range for DOH's guidelines. I did read in the write-up that, you know, part of that is being driven by the number of smaller units, and, you know, those have a tendency to have a greater cost per square foot. What have you seen as the advantages to this method of building versus traditional stick building?
Well, you know, I think, let me come back to costs. I think, you know, we've been very methodical about our approach to demonstrating whether modular works or not. You know, we're not jumping up and down saying it works, it works. We wanted to prove it. And we started small. We started with duplexes and then townhomes, and this will be our first multifamily project. What we have learned is that there's certainly a time advantage. We've been able to build duplexes from groundbreaking to C of O in 4 months, which is much faster than ground up stick construction. I would add that, you know, just to address your comment specifically with respect to pricing and cost, you know, if you're a tract home builder and you're building 100 units in a subdivision, you know, we can't compete with that number. But when it was with respect to urban infill, smaller, relatively smaller size projects, we do compete very well. In fact, there is a cost advantage. We've been able to demonstrate typically for those types of products that we can deliver those projects for just over $200 a square foot. As it relates to West Holden Place, I think your comment is on target relative to the size of the units. On a relative basis, the cost is higher per square foot. But what I would add is that the cost per unit, the total cost per unit for a podium project, that's an urban infill project, smaller project, you know, this is only 77 units versus what would typically be built, you know, and be required to underwrite for a podium is 200 to 300 units. We are able to build these smaller urban infill multifamily projects over a podium, and the total project cost is just over $300,000 a unit, which, if you ask anybody in the market that's in construction, would say that is a cost advantage. So, you know, we're going to build this project, fingers crossed, and demonstrate that we can deliver this type of housing faster and more cost effectively. And further, you know, we spend a lot of time on the design, not just the engineering, but the design of this project. And these units will have fixtures and finishes that compete head on with market rate product. We're not making any sacrifices with respect to the quality of the living environment. We will invite you to walk the project after it's up. We want to obviously demonstrate that to ourselves, but the expectation is we'll be able to demonstrate that to the marketplace.
You mentioned flexibility of design. How much flexibility did you have versus what the manufacturer was offering?
Well, in all of the product that we've designed, in our methodology is we design it well once, and then we replicate it over and over again. So the duplexes that we're building now for Elevation Community Land Trust, we designed 7 years ago. And so I would say that there is a design constraint with modular, which is how wide the boxes can be shipped down the highway, which is typically no more than 16 feet. Otherwise, your transportation costs go up. So our process is we design up to 16 feet in width, and then we design each dwelling unit within an inch of its life. We spend years designing it. We've spent 3 years designing this West Holden product, because we have to work within the 15, 16 foot dimensional width constraint. And so, but with that constraint comes efficiencies. So we want to, but ultimately the goal is to create a high quality living environment. I mean, that's ultimately what the goal here is. So when people walk into the unit, it competes head on with any other product in the market. And the fact that it was built off site in a factory is an afterthought.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Rick Garcia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hey, Adam, Rick Garcia.
Hey, Rick.
Who's your factory builder on this project?
We ended up pivoting to Nashua Builders out of Boise, Idaho. And, what we like about Nashua, there's several factors. They have a very strong balance sheet. They've been in business for 40 years and are very well experienced in multifamily construction, volumetric modular construction. And they also have provided us with a pay and performance bond in terms of executing on this project. And lastly, they've been quite flexible to work with us on the type of design that we wanted to achieve for this project.
Right. So this is your first experience with this factory builder?
Yeah, we personally have not contracted with them for work, but we have seen the product that they have built. They actually built another multifamily product up the street at 17th and Federal. I guess it was about 4 years ago. So we're quite familiar with that project, and we've been to their factory. We spent quite a bit of time with them. So yeah, the short answer is we have high confidence in their ability to perform.
Okay, that's a good news. Appreciate that background. My final question relates to the kind of following on Sam Better's comments. I'm wondering if some of the price considerations or cost per unit considerations are because of the fact that this company's out of town and they have to transport the boxes here versus an in-state or someone would be closer to the site itself. Do you think those are factors that kind of drive up some of the cost per unit considerations?
Frankly, we've studied this particular question quite a bit. And I guess my answer to that is, it's what's the alternative in term, our goal was to build this using offsite volumetric modular construction. Their cost on a relative basis compared to a factory, let's say out of Nebraska or out of even Colorado is more. Although, frankly, we've got a very competitive price for the transportation. It's just over $8,000 a box. It might typically, if we were working with a factory out of Boise 2-3 years ago, it might have been 10 or 12,000. So we do think it's competitive from a cost standpoint, and frankly that number doesn't really move the needle that much in terms of the cost on a per square foot basis. I guess I revert back to my earlier comment that on a cost per unit, we're just over $200,000 a door hard cost for a podium project. And if you're looking at comparable projects, well, first of all, there's not very many podium projects under 100 units being constructed in Metro Denver, for the mere fact that it's cost prohibitive. So we're really comparing our cost to a 200-300 unit podium project, and we're still less on a per unit basis. So we're roughly $210,000 a unit hard cost. And, you know, the folks that we're talking to for much bigger projects are no less than 240, 250, in most cases over 300,000 a door and hard cost alone. So, you know, I guess I would argue on a per square foot basis, given the size of the unit, it's relatively higher, but on a cost per unit, it's not. And I think that what we intend to demonstrate is that the quality of the living space that we're creating in these smaller units is going to be quite high. So we encourage you to come and visit us once this project is up and to walk through it and to experience that.
Great. Thanks, Adam. Appreciate the answers. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Adam.
Thanks, everyone. We really appreciate your time and your consideration.
All right, let's move on to the project application voting stage, and we'll break these two deals up. So let's start with Well Power, 10th on Sheridan. If I could ask for a board member to move to approve Well Power, please.
I move to approve. This is Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy.
Second.
Thank you, Monique, with the second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Great, thank you all. So we've approval on Well Power. On West Holden Place, again, I will recuse myself, but I would like to ask for a motion for approval from the board members.
So moved.
Thanks, Sam.
I second, James.
Thanks, James, with the second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Wonderful. Well, thank you all for your presentations today. Thank you to the board for approving these great projects. We look forward to seeing you all in a couple of weeks.
Thanks all.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.